on WBAI from 1 to 2 p.m. We discuss health, culture, and politics, and a lot more. I come to you with a very, very personal appeal for BAI to help us in our very, very difficult circumstances. What I want you to do is become a BAI buddy for my program. Fill out the secure online form on our website at WBAI.org to donate $10 or more each month directly from your credit card or checking account, and you will get the Members Perks card for discounts around the city posted on the WBAI website. You can donate in the name of Walden's Pond. Please do so. And that will help cut down on on-air fund drive days. Just go to our online donation site at WBAI.org. I'm Shelton Walden, and I thank you for helping out WBAI Desperate Hour of Need.
You're tuned to WBAI in New York and WBAI.org. The previous program, a special replacement program, was What's the Frequency, Kenneth? We hear next Global Movements, Urban Struggles coming up in just one moment. Please stay tuned.
Greetings, this is the War on Immigrants report. That is Three Mustapha's Three from their album Heart of Uncle. And there's an echo here. And Trois fois Trois is the song. And this is the War on Immigrants report. Hello. Now, walking here, I passed all the empty storefronts on Wall Street. It's sort of surprising because, time has passed since Hurricane Sandy, and yet all these bank and deli spaces are papered over with brown paper and empty. And, of course, the ripple effects continue. Originally planned for December 6th, but displaced by fundraising, which was in fact displaced by Hurricane Sandy. This live show will include two guests, and the first half of the show will talk about Hurricane Sandy with Reverend Terry Troia, the Executive Director of Project Hospitality of Staten Island, and we'll be talking about the impact of the storm on the immigrant community there. And then in the second half, after the half hour, we'll be speaking with Jehangir Khattak about Voices of New York, which is an interesting journalism project which translates and aggregates the stories from Spanish, Brazilian, Polish, Arabic, Urdu, Irish, Greek newspapers, all from New York City, Voices of New York, and we'll talk to Jehangir about the trends that he sees in that. So today, again, I'm with, my name's Adam Carroll with the Social Justice Committee of Islamic Circle of North America, also member of New York State Interfaith Network for Immigration Reform, and many, many other committees. A special shout out to colleagues at the New York Disaster Interfaith Services, Occupy Sandy, and the FEMA folks, especially the New York hires. So I wanted to just give an intro to the my guest. First, to say that often in this show we have we talk about surveillance or detention, or we talk about the Islamophobia in MTA ads or other forms of the normalization of racism and hate. Instead of talking about solitary confinement, now we're talking about the solitary confinement of the elderly with no power in their high-rises in Coney Island, like today's New York Times. And I mentioned the New York Times too many times, and I am in danger of becoming a wholly owned subsidiary of the Gray Lady, but like WNYC is, or NPR. But anyway, the stories about Russian immigrants being somewhat abandoned and left to their own devices in the aftermath, or immigrant day laborers. There are many stories beginning to arise about the impact of the storm on immigrant communities. And along with Occupy Sandy, FEMA, and other faith-based nonprofits, these groups have all been responding to the impact. And with me today, I have Terry Troia, who's the executive director of Project Hospitality. And I should preface that by saying that only miles from where we sit now in Staten Island, the disaster is far from over, even as the attention of the nation moves on to other issues. And it's going to become wearisome to some, but we need to keep reminding folks that folks not far from here are living, perhaps are destitute. Recent findings published this week by Make the Road estimate that 40% of Staten Island immigrants were displaced from their homes by the storm, and that 78% of immigrants and an even higher percentage of non-English proficient immigrants had not even applied for relief, even those forms of help they are permitted to receive. So we'll be talking about that a bit. Reverend Troia, welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks. I know that you are probably extremely busy, and thanks for joining us after a long work day.
My pleasure.
Yeah. And those of us who don't know Staten Island, maybe I should just ask you a little bit first about where you all are located, which communities you serve, and, just what you were doing before the storm hit.
Sure. Well, we serve all of Staten Island. We've been around for 30 years, and we're a not-for-profit interfaith effort, and we serve people in need. So it's a broad range of folks, anywhere from hungry people to people on the streets to marginalized communities. So, and we are first responders, in 9/11, and we were first responders here as well. And we're located in Port Richmond for our main office, but we have 29 locations in Staten Island, and 2 of those locations were in the beach areas themselves. We had a mobile food pantry site in Midland Beach and one in Newdorp Beach. So for the last 7 years, we've been working with those populations in those communities.
What kind of populations are there? I mean, I know it's not only immigrant communities, but what's the range of?
Well, let me just tell you, as a native Staten Islander, and the beach communities have always been communities where you see new immigrant populations planting roots. The South Beach area, which was hit, is been over the last century a very strong Italian community. In fact, as a child growing up, where you went to Italian Mass was in South Beach, to the Italian parish there, Holy Rosary. And I actually went to school in the South Beach area. And Midland Beach was the working class Irish community of Staten Island. So that was a significant ethnic community there. In the last 20 years, new immigrants have come in and laid their claim to the stake in those communities, and that includes a strong Russian population that's come over the bridge from Brooklyn and settled in the South Beach area. There's a strong Polish community as well in South Beach, a very strong Mexican and other Latino community, other Latin American countries in both Midland Beach and South Beach, Albanians, Filipinos, and Chinese, and some West Africans. So it's really a multicultural area with all first-generation people that fill that neighborhood, and you can see that in the plethora of new Russian restaurants, Polish delis, and Mexican stores and bakeries.
I guess maybe I have some stereotypes about Staten Island, and I assume that because it's perhaps more politically conservative, that there will be less acceptance of the diversity, and reading the comments, as one sometimes does after these articles about the impact on immigrant communities in Staten Island. It's very common to read, I may be Hispanic, but I have no respect for those undocumented immigrants that feel entitled to receive help from this country. Make an effort to become a citizen and learn the language, and then you can try to get help, and so forth and so on. So that doesn't mean that is a representative of Staten Island, of course, but I'm just wondering Is there a challenge to include the immigrant community in the wake of this particular disaster?
Well, very much so, and it really starts before the disaster. Just in the warnings to evacuate, done by local press that's English-speaking. Many people don't read the local media because they may not be able to read English or read it well, or it's not part of not part of their daily life, or they're listening to ethnic radio or watching ethnic television, and not clear how the announcements were made for evacuation. So people were not all in the loop in terms of evacuation. Mm-hmm. 3 Polish people died. Mm-hmm. Which is a significant number of people from one particular ethnic community in the midst of the storm. So people are on the outskirts in terms of just the warnings to get out. And in the aftermath, again, most of the announcements for events, opportunities for funding, etc., are again done through English-speaking press. And so people really don't know what's going on. And since you have 2 groups of people, basically, you have folks that are still in the neighborhood. 24,000 housing units were damaged by Sandy. Mm-hmm. 14,000 were significantly damaged or had to be evacuated. And there are 9,000 households currently without electricity or heat. And in those 9,000 households are many people who are still hunkered down. Living in wood frames without any walls. People who are certainly without any way to cook. People who are tenting in their backyards, living in their cars or in trailers. So that's the kind of population you have there, still in the disaster area. The flip side of that is that you have a great diaspora. You have people who are scattered throughout the island, and it's really hard to find where everybody is, and everybody that's out there is not really connected to what's going on, what services are available, what assistance is accessible to them. So those are the kind of barriers people are facing. In terms of the undocumented immigrant community, there's no doubt that in the new immigrant community that is a significant population. We think of it predominantly in the Latino and Mexican communities, but it's a significant undocumented community in the Polish community, in the Albanian community, and less significant, but still there in the Russian community. And those become obstacles for people to come forward because there's a fear of moving onto the radar screen. There's a belief that you're not entitled to anything. And so there's been significant barriers to care there. But I will say this, FEMA has been magnificent. FEMA has really gone the extra mile to search out those marginalized communities. I've been with them going to the Albanian mosque to make the relationships with the Muslim community. They've met with the Lubavitch community to make the inroads to the Russians who've been affected. They have been sponsoring special Spanish-speaking FEMA days to reach out to those populations that are not necessarily connected to FEMA, and this is their first opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great to hear. I heard today from a young woman who is working for FEMA, and she mentioned that people had potential clients or people she was trying to help actually fled from her because they were afraid that she was government. And so I realized that some FEMA people may have to overcome that distrust and fear because just of the society we live in these days. But that they're trying to do it, and partnership is key to that success. As far as partnership, I will ask about benefits in a minute, but do you have any stories about the different experiences that some people have gone through?
Well, stories in terms of their evacuation or of their process of getting benefits or that kind of thing?
I think the whole continuum, the whole thing, yeah.
Okay, well, truly have heard the most horrific stories of people being trapped and being rescued. Immigrants who were on top of their roofs. I mean, many people, not just immigrants. People that have to be rescued by boat. I have heard both the story of immigrants who have saved other people by rescue and those who have been rescued by other people. One story comes to mind of an Albanian family who had 2 handicapped children, and they escaped. Were able to get the children out. They left the medication at the house, and the father went back at about 6:20 on Monday night to get the medication, and that's when the wave hit, and he clung to the top of his car, and he pulled another person to safety on top of the car, and they rode out the storm on the top of his handicap accessible van.
Wow.
Which in the end perished. The van went underwater, but they held on the roof. So throughout the entire night till they were rescued the next morning.
Wow. And I wonder if a family like that, for example, what kind of benefits they could get for replacing their van, or if there's any, it depends, I suppose.
Well, one of the things you need to know that whatever benefits you get, nobody makes you whole here, neither your insurance company nor FEMA. So there's a misperception there that somehow whatever you need to fix your house is going to come from the federal government. That is not the purpose of the FEMA aid. Mm-hmm. Most undocumented immigrants have been able to apply for FEMA through children who have been born here. If their children or their grandchildren are born, if there is a person with a Social Security number in the household, people were able to apply for benefits. So where undocumented immigrants got left out are people who did not have children who lived with them that could not be claimed in a household, single men, a lot of the day laborers who lived, day laborers sharing a basement, that kind of thing, they were left out. I know single women who were left out, and people who lived separately from their families that had children born in the United States. The other piece to that is that in many immigrant communities, people are doubled up, tripled up, sharing an apartment. So the problem is that's considered normal to our way of life here. It's not considered a standard of acceptable living. And so for FEMA, if 3 households claimed that they lived at one address, that would kick back your application. It was not sensitive to those kind of cultural issues among new immigrant communities. So, and people didn't know enough in many instances to go back and reapply or go back and challenge the rejection. So there was a whole education piece that was missing here. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there's still people who got their initial rejection who have not gone back. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to present all the members of your household to say, I was living with my uncle and I was living with my neighbor and we were all living in the same basement. But you have to find those people. And in the great diaspora post-Sandy, it's hard to find out where people went because people are doubled up. They're living with neighbors. They're living with friends. They're living with relatives. They're moving around. And so it's hard to collect people in order to make those full claims based on multiple households in one dwelling.
For those who might be able to obtain the DSNAP disaster food stamps, I think the period for that has passed, right, this Monday?
Yeah, that was that ended this Monday.
Yeah, that was a short period. But as far as other deadlines, are there any immediate deadlines coming up for anything, or is there now recognition that people will need time to regroup?
Well, we're very grateful that FEMA extended its deadline for application to January 28th. Mm-hmm. Okay. One of the questions that is not answered is, for people who don't have Social Security numbers who qualify for deferred action, the administrative change that was made by the Obama administration for Dream eligible youth,
childhood arrivals, right?
Right. So if they have their application in for DACA, and they don't have a Social Security number yet, is there any way that they can put in a FEMA claim with a Social Security number pending? That's a question that's outstanding.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question is that's not answered is if you have a mom and a dad and a child and your mother-in-law or your father-in-law living with you, does that then become a family of 3 adults and 1 child? Or is that a family of 2 adults and 1 child and 1 person is considered on the outskirts of that family? And do they file 1 claim or are they 2 separate claims? Like, these are complicated questions, and I'm not sure all those questions have been answered yet. Certainly, what I've really appreciated about FEMA is their willingness to go anywhere, meet with anybody, to try to get to those marginalized communities and to bring in whatever linguistic resources are necessary in order to penetrate the communities and get people to the table to fill out the form. That's been a great success.
Well, that sounds hopeful. And the report that came out written by Make New York. I think you're quoted. Yeah. It is somewhat critical, or maybe quite critical, and it mentions 1 in 3 surveyed suffered damage to their home or property. This is talking about the immigrant communities. 27% have fallen behind on their rent. And elsewhere also I read that, of the New York City Rapid Repair Program, it's fixed only 160 out of 38,000 homes and businesses. That was listed in something, an event at St. Mary's. So there are many alarming statistics that are floating around, and I think we're early in the process of recovery.
Clearly. Yeah. And I just want to say, I can't really speak to the details of the rapid repair, but I do know tonight I was talking with a FEMA official who took somebody's case who was a handicapped elderly lady and was able to maneuver the system to get her to the top of the rapid repair list.
Good.
So that's the kind of intervention we need. And that's like really smart government officials who look and see where the need is and then do their best to fill that gap. The other thing is, and this is a longer-term Sandy issue, and that is the issue of affordable housing. Where are people going to live? This is a huge issue. One of the terrible things that's happened as a result of the superstorm is that real estate prices have gone up. Rental prices have soared. $1,700 for a 2-bedroom apartment, exclusive of heat and hot water, in Staten Island is absolutely unheard of. So people lived in the beach areas because the beach areas were cheaper housing.
Right.
And that cheap housing stock is gone. And you have a supply-demand situation here where the demand far exceeds the supply of housing, and that's raising the rents. And so that makes it even more complicated for people to try and stabilize their lives by finding some level of permanent housing. So this really calls for an examination of an affordable housing plan, taking this borough into the future on Staten Island, realizing that the low-income immigrant worker is the backbone of much of our economy, certainly in the restaurant industry and in the health home care industry and in maintenance and construction. That's who's doing the dirty work. And if we can't provide some level of safe housing for folks, even if it's a humble basement that's shared by families, then we have got to, ask ourselves, how are we going to sustain our economy in the long run? What is the overall fallout? And then what is the plan for affordable housing? How do we make enough place for everybody that's livable?
Well, that sounds like a political will issue, and I hope people are pushing for that. I don't know who is involved in that public discussion yet, but it seems an important point. As far as monies, I believe that the Congress has not allocated money yet to this. After Katrina, I think it only took a matter of weeks before the allocation of billions, and that hasn't happened yet, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct, right. I know it's pending, and I know the ask is somewhere between 43 and 47 million, I believe. 47 billion. And that ask has not happened. And the other piece that hasn't happened is whether there's a final answer on the question of FEMA trailers coming to Staten Island in order to provide some level of long-term temporary housing until the structures can be rebuilt. Here is the issue. We are below sea level in those beach areas, and there are people who have emptied out their house and done the best to support the structural integrity of their cottages and beach bungalows. But are they going to be torn down? I mean, there's a study right now. There was a meeting yesterday at City Hall to discuss what to do with this housing stock. Are they going to have to be lifted up on stilts? Are they going to have to rebuilt? And that's going to take months, if not years. And so to think that people are going to actually return to their homes in a few weeks after Sandy is simply not a realistic concept.
Right.
And we have to reckon with the fact that we need some kind of long-term transitional housing until we can make a decision as to how to handle the waterfront, how to rebuild in a safe way, because I don't think it's a matter of if this happens again. I think it's a matter of when this happens again. and so that we don't put people through the trauma of this. So there's a lot of questions out there, and people are frozen, not sure which way to go with their own housing.
I remember after Katrina, there was discussions about, well, why are they living in that neighborhood? It's not worth the risk, and it's kind of wishing the problem out of existence. And of course, who pays for that? It's often the poor and vulnerable communities. So some of that seems to be similar. As far as the amount of monies, Sidney here reminded me that he thought it was $60 billion. That's also what I believe I remember. But we don't know what it is until we get it. So I guess that's the process we're in.
That's true. Yes.
So the FEMA trailers, the questions about long-term and short-term questions about housing. As far as immigrant needs, I understand that USCIS, United States Customs, and I should remember what it stands for. They were giving extra time for people to file their papers and so forth. So there's been some basic humanitarian moves from that quarter. But as far as people's actual needs, I guess many are thrown out of work or they're struggling. Your multi-service organization, I know, is raising money, or at least I believe it's connected to a special fund. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We've raised close to $1.3 million now.
Great. And I was wondering how people can make a donation to that fund.
Well, they can send a check to Project Hospitality, 100 Park Avenue, Staten Island, New York, 10302, and mark it, for Sandy.
Mm-hmm. And this is there a website also attached to? Well, I'm sure your organization.
ProjectHospitality.org.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you can also make donations online.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I want to say is, $1.3 million is a drop in the bucket when you consider that there are 14,000 displaced Staten Island families.
Mm-hmm.
And the money needs are great in the immigrant community; they are greater, and in the undocumented immigrant community, they are even greater. And just tonight, I just hired an immigrant to do maintenance in the evacuation center, who worked as a cook in a Russian restaurant on South Beach, and who lost his job because the restaurant went under as a result of Sandy. And I was really happy to be able to give somebody a job who lost his job.
Yeah.
Even if it's only for a few weeks, it's something to put in their pocket.
Well, that's a different kind of ripple effect, and I think that's the good kind that we're looking for.
Right. You need more. You need. Everybody has to be sensitive to this and look for where people have fallen out of work, and we need some kind of economic recovery plan in addition to the housing recovery plan.
Mm-hmm. There's the Immigrant Information Center. There's some Liberian immigrant groups as well. I mean, I think there's quite a number of groups in Staten Island. So again, it's a more diverse community than some people may realize.
Right.
Than I realized. Yeah.
And I would recommend to any immigrant who is listening tonight to this program, the central place to register for any immigrant information or benefits is El Centro del Inmigrante, 1546 Castleton Avenue, the Immigrant Center, 718-420-6466, 718-420-6466, or 917-913-4488. And there you can register, and any immigrant benefits that come across the table for Staten Island are dispersed, and all information is dispersed in a variety of languages. And that's the key.
Is that a center that's open regular hours?
Yes, that's opened 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 7 to 3 on Fridays, and it's open Saturdays 8 to 4.
Great. 6 days.
And I just want to say the immigrant day labor community on Staten Island, through the efforts of El Centro, have put hundreds of day labor volunteers every Sunday in the disaster areas, cleaning out people's houses, tearing down sheetrock, exposing the wood, ripping up floors in order for the mold to dry out. and it's been an amazing experience of solidarity with those who have suffered Sandy, to see these immigrant day laborers barely making $10, $12 an hour themselves, volunteering a full day of their time every weekend. Yeah, a tremendous effort.
Well, thank you. It's a community, rebuilding community together, and I hope that listeners will want to join and support that. So again, this has been Terry Troia speaking with us today from Project Hospitality in Staten Island. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, and wish you a good holiday.
Good holiday. Peace.
You can marry a taxi driver, I don't care. You can marry a lorry driver, I don't care. You can marry... Hey, taxi! Taxi, wait down Lagos. If she must go, nobody cares. If she marries a taxi driver, I don't care. If she marries a lorry driver, I don't care. If she marries a motorway driver, I don't care. If she marries a taxi driver, I don't care.
And welcome back. This is the War on Immigrants Report, which is part of Global Movements, Urban Struggles on WBAI 99.5 FM on your dial. And that was Three Mustafa's Three, Heart of Uncle, and the track was called Taxi Driver, I Don't Care. And that's a Bosnian fantasia sort of mix of music. So the next part of our show will be a conversation with Jehangir Khattak of Voices of New York, which used to be called Voices that Must Be Heard. I believe I got that right. And it's a great resource and source of different voices from New York City's immigrant communities. Jehangir, are you with us?
Yes.
Yes,
thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. And, I see by your bio you began your journalism career in the 80s in Pakistan, working for a variety of English daily newspapers, and then you were the news editor of Frontier Post. During the 1990s, you covered the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the civil war there, the rise of the Taliban, lots of interesting stuff, and lots of other activities with Reporters Sans Frontières. And you've been in New York City for quite a while, since the 90s, I guess. And I recall the New York Community Media Alliance. Was that the platform or the vehicle that started the group Voices That Must Be Heard?
Yes, Adam. It was after 9/11. New York Community Media Alliance in those days used to be Independent Press Association.
Right.
And it had offices both in New York as well as on the West Coast in San Francisco. At that time, those who were running the IPA felt the need of a platform where they could highlight the perspective of the Muslim community in post-9/11 America. And that's how Voices That Must Be Heard was started. But later on, they started adding voices from other communities as well, because when they started the Voices and started bringing stories from the American Muslim community publications or publications that were published in other languages and were representing different Muslim communities. So that was basically like English translation of articles which were published in other languages, and that experiment became very popular. So they started, Abby Sher and Juana Ponce de Leon and others, they started adding more voices. They started adding more community newspapers and hired translators who would go through different newspapers in different languages, pick the stories that would reflect the community's perspective on national issues or issues that were directly affecting a particular community. And then they would get them translated, and through, like after an editorial exercise, they will show up on the Voices That Must Be Heard. The Voices That Must Be Heard became a very popular platform over the years because it became one of the most trusted platforms, and it gave you a very broad view and deep view of New York's ethnic and community media landscape. People from all walks of life started following it, and that is when NYCMA, or New York Community Media Alliance, which in those days was IPA, they started IP's Journalism Awards as well. The idea was not just to share the voices of these communities with a wider audience in the mainstream, but also recognize their work. And that's why they launched the IP's Journalism Awards. Now, IPs have become a prestigious award for this media sector in this part of the country. And we will be holding the 11th awards next year in March. So in 2011, when New York Community Media Alliance faced certain funding issues, and that was when the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism came forward and decided to adopt two of NYCMA's signature projects, that is Voices That Must Be Heard and the IP's Journalism Awards.
It's great they stepped in. Yeah. I remember, probably speaking with you 8 years ago or so when Abby was director, and if I remember correctly, when I was working as a columnist at Muslims Weekly, and getting awards or being nominated meant something. It is great. I think probably a number of communities were pleased to be recognized by groups outside their own circles, and I think that it's quite an encouragement. And just looking at the website today, I mean, I see, for example, just in the first half of this show, we were talking about the impact on immigrant communities of Hurricane Sandy, and I see a number of articles on that issue. Immigrants face bigger hurdles in Sandy recovery. I see day laborers aid in Sandy rebuilding from the New York City News Service. I see love of sea and damage to Russian businesses, the link of that article. I see several more. One in the Jewish Forward from November 16th saying that 12 Israeli army volunteers, vets of war zones and relief operations, were shocked at the absence of government assistance in Brooklyn in the wake of the disaster. Interesting perspectives. Home care attendants put patients over selves and so forth. That was from the World Journal, which I've never heard of, in fact. Nowy Dziennik, if that's the right way to say it, the Polish newspaper, talked about the Poles and the Rockaways and the difficulties they were facing, quite serious ones. So, I mean, great stories, actually, that many other people would not know necessarily.
Right. We have been trying to not just go through, like we have a team of translators. We have a pretty large group of translators and student reporters and volunteers and our interns who basically go through different publications almost every day. and we pick the stories that we feel are important and needs to be shared with a wider audience, and then we get them translated if they are in languages other than English, or if they are in English, then we, put them up on the voices. And similarly, we also do some original reporting. You mentioned several stories which we, either translated from other newspapers like Novijanic and some Chinese and Korean newspapers and the Russian newspapers, but also we did some of our own reporting. Like we did a report on how the Muslim community came forward in the Brighton Beach area and joined the recovery effort. So that story, in fact, received a lot of traction with our readers. So we have been doing that, and the idea is to showcase the great work that this media sector is doing. Just to give you an example, Adam, New York City has more than 3 million immigrants, and more than 1.4 million of them either speak, limited or English, or they have no English language skills. So their virtual primary source of information is this media sector. They go and they read these newspapers. So these newspapers have not just a following but also loyalty. These communities, their businesses support these newspapers. If you look at them, they don't receive any, virtually no advertisements from the corporate sector. If you look at their strength, if you look at their depth, if you look at their, I don't want to say that they have really top-class reporting in all the newspapers because it varies from newspaper to newspaper and community to community, but I think they are doing an extremely, extremely important work. And that's why people follow them, they support them, despite the fact, as I mentioned, they don't receive any advertisements from the corporate sector.
I was wondering. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and we have been trying to work in different areas. Now, CUNY Graduate School of Journalism recently started. They just founded a Center for Community and Ethnic Media, and Voices That Must Be Heard was renamed and rebranded as Voices of NY. Now the website address is voicesofny.org. So when it was rebranded, we added more content to it. We broadened its scope by bringing more community and languages for translation. But also we started training the journalists from this media sector. Just last year, the center organized, I think, more than 40 training sessions, if I'm not wrong. It is more than that, definitely. Where hundreds of journalists from this media sector were trained in basic skills of reporting to advanced use of camera and video editing and social media skills. So we organized all those trainings, and the idea was to build the capacity of this media sector to generate even more higher quality stories, because this sector is so important, it is so influential, it has such a large following, loyal following, that, in an economy where everything is shrinking, we just completed a survey of this media sector, and we will be publishing it in the form of a directory of this media sector in the coming weeks. And we found that while we had instances where very, very small community publications had to close because of economic pressures, but at the same time we had publications like in Russian community where they recently launched a daily newspaper. So we did see some expansion of this media. And also we saw publications, for example, in Nepali community, where they used to be fortnightly newspapers. Now they have become weekly newspapers. So we do see some improvement, not just in their content, but also in their frequency. And it's all because their advertising base is expanding. They are going beyond community lines, because if you look at, for example, Nepali publication, now just keep in mind that there is not a very large Nepali community in New York. But if you look at their media, you will see that their newspapers just don't carry, advertisements about Nepali businesses. Rather, you will see some advertisements from Jackson Heights-based Indian businesses, Pakistani businesses, Bangladeshi businesses, and of course Nepali businesses. So their base is basically expanding, and they are going beyond community lines.
Well, I remember, I realized that advertising is key to maintaining these for the most part. And when I go into, I was just in Jackson Heights today and noticed how many Urdu language newspapers are piled up by the door of the restaurants, and they're free papers. And so they certainly sustain a certain level of must be customer loyalty if they can keep going like that. I'm wondering also, though, about trends in political consciousness or other trends that you might see over the years in these different communities, if anything comes to mind. Any shifts, that you've seen, any particular growth?
Well, certainly this media is, we do see shifts. There are different kinds, of course. One, as I mentioned, is, I would say, somewhat consolidation of this media, especially the very, very small publications, which have, I think, become more stable now. They are coming, regularly, being printed regularly. They have a strong following and readership. And there's a transformation. Every time there is a new newspaper launched, or every time a new immigrant community launches a publication, so they basically, much of their content, those newspapers' content, comes from the countries of their origin. Like they just pick the stories from the countries of their origin newspapers and reproduce them. But over the years, I have seen, because I have worked with this media sector for a pretty long time now, that content, that trend is changing. We see more focus on local issues. We see more local stories. Like this media is shifting its gears. It is more focused. We did not, for example, see the trend of endorsements by this media of politicians before elections. But over the years, we have seen that this trend is also emerging. We have seen many publications endorsing candidates before the elections, and that's why the politicians are also waking up to the reality of this media, and that's why they also reach out to these communities' publications for endorsements. I would say even the mainstream media is also waking up to the reality of this ethnic and community media. And just to give you an example, Adam, in 2008 elections, New York Community Media Alliance, for example, launched an initiative. The idea was to send journalists from 12 different community publications to go and cover the presidential elections. The program started from New Hampshire primaries, and it ended up in Denver and St. Paul. And they covered the primaries as well as the conventions. When the primaries were covered, and those stories were generated by the journalists who went and covered the primaries, and somebody at New York Times was looking at those stories, and those stories generated so much interest that when this group was going to Denver to cover the Democratic National Convention, New York Times embedded one of its reporters with the group. And that reporter was not reporting on the convention. Rather, he was reporting on the journalists, the ethnic and community media journalists, to see how they were reporting on the convention, how they covered the convention, because that itself was a very interesting angle for New York Times. And then ultimately, after the conventions, New York Times published an article which I think was more than 2,500 words long. So this is what, mainstream media is waking up to this reality.
Well, the journalists are reporting about the journalists. Yes, it sounds like a hall of mirrors, but also, as you were suggesting, a recognition, an important one, of the importance of the voices. And I'm wondering, in terms of, your efforts to encourage civic engagement, I think, through these programs, and to assist in maybe professionalizing some of this. If you have any particular accomplishments you wanted to point out, any particular awardees that stand out and come to mind now, or any particular other things?
Well, in terms of accomplishments and the work that we are doing, I think we have accomplished a lot.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, as I mentioned, training is an important part of the work that the Center for Community and Ethnic Media at CUNY Graduate School of Journalism is doing. Our Executive Director, Gary Pear, and Sarah Bartlett, and, others,
Ms. Junko,
editor.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing very important work. And they have been focusing their attention on not just training, but also we just launched a fellowship for members of this media, and the fellowship is basically about how to cover an election. Next year we will have elections in the city, and we are preparing this group of reporters for this election, how they will be reporting, and how they will be covering the elections for their respective communities. So this, I think, is a very, very important milestone. And secondly, we are, documenting this media sector. New York Community Media Alliance, published a directory of this media sector, which is called Many Voices, One City, and it was published in 2008. That was the last time when it was published. So we are moving forward and building on what NICMA did. And in fact, we have just completed the survey, as I mentioned earlier, of this media sector. And we have documented a large number of publications. And it is the most, the document that we are creating, the directory that will be ultimately generated out of this data will be the most authentic document which we can very safely claim that you can come across in this region about this media. We understand that it may not have all the community newspapers, but we can say for sure that whatever we have, and it is a big number, and it will be really very, very authentic data. So that's, I think, a huge accomplishment that, we just completed. Besides that, we have, through IPPES awards, we have generated a lot of interest within this community media, because in order to participate in the IPPES, you have to have some original content and reporting. So that has basically created a sense of competition within the communities. And for the first time in many years, and I have been organizing IPPES for the past, I think, now 4 years, and I know that this year I see a level of interest that I have not seen before. Even I received calls like in the month of October, when we were still planning the IPPES for the next year, from members of this media asking me, when the IPPES will be announced, and we really want to participate in it. So there is that interest. This media is doing an important work, and it is very eager to share that work, and also it is very eager to be recognized. Because remember that despite the fact that this media sector is doing an extremely important work, I don't think so that it has received the level of recognition that it deserves.
And these voices, I understand, they're, sorry to cut you off, are community voices. It's not like corporate entertainments. And so I think it's very important to support these voices, these organizations that try to reflect community needs and community aspirations. Sometimes I'm concerned about the fragmentation of the immigrant voice because you'll have different groups, maybe the Irish, maybe the Polish, maybe this and that, saying include us in the visa lottery. We're not worried about the others, but bring us in. And so instead of playing, being played against each other, having something like this that brings the different voices together in chorus, if you will, then you can actually begin to make out a different song, a different play a different tune. But I hope that the IPPY Award winners will be winning the Pulitzer Prize one of these days soon. I think it's a great opportunity to, as you said, be recognized. Again, your project can be found online, and I was wondering if you could just give people some basic directions how to find these stories.
All you have to do is, our address is voicesofny.org, and when you go to our website, you will find stories that we, update every day. You will see stories about different communities. We are expanding, and bringing more stories into the voices, and also we will be launching another website of our newly established Center for Community and Ethnic Media. It will be, I think, available early next year. And we will have a link to the center on the Voices page as well. So Voices basically is a platform where you can find stories about community and ethnic media. We also encourage our readers to be part of the debate. Of late, we have been receiving lots of feedback from our readers, and we encourage our readers to come visit our website, read the stories that we put up, and also share their vision and views about the issues that we highlight on the Voices. And also, if they have any questions or concerns, they can always send us an email through the system that we have on the website, and also they can subscribe to Voices. There is a link for that as well. All you have to do is just give your email address and submit it. So you will start receiving the Voices newsletter every day. So that way you will keep yourself abreast of what's going on within different communities. Because Voices, we send out a newsletter every morning. So Voices is a great platform.
And then I think, because I have to wind up, I need a couple of minutes at the end of the show. But Jehangir, this is very inspiring, and thank you very much. And maybe you can come on some other time again, and we can revisit. It sounds like there are great things coming at Voices of New York. And again, for listeners, that is voicesofny.org, right?
Yes.
And so, Jehangir, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Adam. Yeah. Thank you for having me on the show.
I'm looking forward to reading all these. Oh gosh, there's so many interesting articles here. Gentrifying Park Slope, the bodegas being squeezed out, Christmas in a Jewish home, asylum fraud arrest doesn't surprise many in Chinatown. All kinds of cool stuff. So, anyway, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the show. Thank you.
And before I finish the War on Immigrants report this month, just wanted to again mention that Mayor Bloomberg urges New Yorkers still without heat from Hurricane Sandy to relocate to a warm place immediately. We got this email today. Temperatures are expected to drop into the mid-20s this weekend, putting residents living without heat at risk of hypothermia, other serious health problems. And city is going door to door, but we don't know for sure if they will reach everyone. So it is potentially a life-threatening cold that's coming this weekend after the deluge tomorrow. And so if people cannot find warm places to stay on their own, if they're able to call 311 or go to a New York City restoration center, there are places to refer them. Most people don't like to go to shelters, but please don't freeze to death. And so the other issue, and we know from our first guest today that there are a lot of people huddled in empty houses and in unheated houses in Staten Island. So this is a real concern.